Welcome back to the Real Estate Excellence Podcast. Special show today. It is March 19th. We are 5 days, and let me get my screen set up here. We are 5 days from the New York Times announcing the NAR proposed settlement. Today, I have some local industry experts, attorneys, and an agent who has been dedicated herself to educating the real estate agents, young and old. Our goal with today's show is to educate and inform so that everyone understands where the real estate industry is at currently today, March 19th, 2024. There are a lot of headlines that are clickbait and are not true, and all along the news media have no idea what they are talking about oftentimes. So today I have from the First Coast School of Real Estate and United Real Estate Gallery, Amanda Hauser. We have Rose Alberre, Sarah Puente, both distinguished attorneys at Landmark Title with us to join us. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Tracy.
All right. I look at that echo. I got I got a choir over there. All right. Cool.
Don't ask me to sing.
I'll sing. I love
sing.
Just to introduce everybody a little bit, I don't want to spend a lot of time on because I know people really want to get into the nuts and bolts of what we're going to talk about. But obviously, Amanda's background, she was on episode 99. So if you want details on her thing, but she recently became owner of the First Coast Real Estate School. So we're proud of her of that. And this year is her 10th year in the industry. Am I correct?
14 total, 10 in Florida.
10 in Florida. That's right. That's right. I was trying to remember. Was it what state did you come from?
Louisiana.
Louisiana. That's
Wallet.
right. That's right. Oh, I remember you telling me stories about the bayou and stuff like that in our podcast. Rose, a distinguished graduate from Stetson University Law, and you went there for your undergrad as well. Am I not?
No, undergrad was USF. Go Bulls.
Okay. All right. You got what is it? You had Florida. You had Stetson listed there twice.
For MBA.
Yeah, you got your master's. Okay.
That's right.
Got your master's there. And Sarah, locally here, Florida Coastal School of Law, cum laude. Right? Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Graduated cum laude. It means she had good grades. But you didn't publish your grades. Rose did on her LinkedIn. I would take those down. So, all right. I want to kick off the show a little bit just to give I'm going to get myself in the camera here correctly. I want to kick off the show a little bit, and Sarah's going to lead us off with just a little bit of the background of where this whole thing got started from this class action lawsuit to, if you could, in a brief period, get us to where we're at today.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how did we get here? There's been multiple class action lawsuits relating the commissions. It's been nationwide, but most notably was the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit, which was filed in 2019. The major claim in that lawsuit is that there was a conspiracy that existed with National Association of Realtors, MLS, and some large brokerages. The conspiracy was that the cooperative compensation rule in the subject MLSs, that they had the purpose or the effect of raising or inflating the commission rates so that sellers ended up paying more for commissions. The date that everybody will remember was Halloween of last year, where a federal jury rendered a verdict in favor of the sellers who were the plaintiffs. $1.78 billion against NAR and some of the big brokerages.
Right.
Initially, NAR appealed, but as of last Friday, we all know that NAR has now entered into a proposed settlement, proposed being the key word. We don't know how long it will take for the court to approve it, but as of right now, they're stating July.
So $1.7 billion. Now, obviously, to our federal government, that's like pocket change, but to all these companies, that's a lot of money. How, from a lawyer standpoint, looking at this class action to kind of educate us non-lawyeries, how do you come up with a number? Did they have that many people claiming that much in losses, or they were I guess losses really? I mean, they weren't physically hurt, but they were set back $1.7 billion, or is there like a punishment in there? What do they call that in the legal world? Where they
Punitive damages.
Punitive damages.
But,
yes, thank you.
I mean, Rose can probably give more like explanation on it from the litigation side of it, but as far as I'm aware, that the jury is presented with kind of a formula in order to determine what that damage amount is, and they give them a sheet of paper for them to come up with an amount as to what they assess the damages are based on what, the circumstances.
Right. And I'm going to ask this. I want to start this question off. I guess I'm going to throw it out there. I don't know what's changed in real estate for as long as we remember. I mean, as the commissions changed, 5-6%. Amanda, since the 14 years you've been involved, is that really, it's always, some people negotiate, obviously larger price home, maybe they only get 4 or 5%, where, smaller home, they're splitting 6% with the buyer is common. Has that really changed since as far back as anyone can remember?
I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions, honestly, is commission has always been negotiable. I know agents that will work for a whole lot less, and I know some agents that will never work for less than whatever their amount is. And
Right.
so I think the biggest misconception is that commissions have always been negotiable. And I have been licensed in 2 different markets. And yes, there's a difference in one market to another. Of course, that was 14 years ago in the other market, so it was also some time ago. But I don't truly believe I can say I've ever seen a standard, because most realtors are their own independent business. So they're deciding what their profit margins are going to be. They're negotiating their commissions.
Or what the market will bear.
Or what it will bear, because, at a time where someone, we were coming out of the crash and people were barely crawling back into equity, think about it. If an agent needed to get that listing, right, because that agent was probably hungry too, right, they probably were willing to work for a lot less, right? That seller needed to be able to get out with barely anything, right? Or a short sale, which is a lot of cases in 2009 and 10, and then you have another situation where a seller might have a ton of equity and be like, I need it gone tomorrow. I'm willing to pay you more. So it's so negotiable, and it all depends on that agent's business model too, and how they're running their business and what the motivation is of the seller. It is between the seller and the listing agent what the seller is willing to pay.
I'm gonna put out there, anyone listening right now, I do have my Facebook up right here, so if you want to make a comment, a question, and we can pose it out here to do so. My question actually to anyone out there, if my guests don't know, is during that time where there were a lot of short sales going on, a lot of bank-owned properties, what were the banks paying?
It's a great question.
I would bet the banks are obviously already losing money, so they're going to try to get a couple nickels and dimes from the agent as well. I would imagine. I imagine some banks probably have paid 6% on everything.
I'll say this. I never had an issue with negotiating the commission I wanted to be paid on a short sale and it not being paid by the bank, if that's a good enough answer for you.
Okay.
So I have had several short sales I've dealt with. One actually not that long ago, within the last 3 years. And I was able to negotiate my commission as the listing agent with the bank, and I was paid the commission that I wanted to be paid. This is what I wanted to be paid. This is what the bank agreed to. And then we were in.
Because a lot of them have already built it into their profit and loss model anyway.
Oh, I'm sure. At that point, when they're analyzing a short sale, they've got all those numbers crunched in there.
All right. So back to our attorneys over here. So we have the right and the left and right here. No. Who is really, from what I'm hearing, again, because I started purging every YouTube video come out in here, everybody's commenting, and a lot of the big, from Keller Williams, Real was out there. I was watching him this morning, EXP, all these people, all these executives with those companies are coming out and chiming in on it. And a lot of them are saying that supposedly the plaintiffs, right? They're not getting. It's the lawyers who are going to get all this money. There's going to be some nickels and dimes really for these people who supposedly had a loss because they didn't understand that it was negotiable.
Isn't that how it always is? The lawyers always end up making the money.
That's why you guys went in the real estate title, right?
I will say though, I sold a house back in 2016, I believe it was. I have received 2 postcards. One from the Moral lawsuit and one from the Sitzer Burnett, basically saying you qualify as one of the class members, has all the information on it, like here's how you sign up to become part of the class. So, they are sending stuff out about this. and I received both of those within the last month.
But we know the lawyers are the ones that are going to be making out big here.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you, Tracy, and all of you here, but I'm excited about the changes. They are not as bad as the headlines are making them seem.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at the settlement, it's not really that big of a change. I mean, what I heard someone say, and I agree with, is the destination is the same. We're going to still get to where we're going. The path is a little different.
You watched that video?
I watched that video and like 1,000 others just like it.
That was the real
I
brokerage
liked
right
it.
there.
I agree with it. So, I mean, there's all this, people are nervous about what they don't know. But when you read it and you sit down and look at it, and it's still all speculation because it has not been approved by the court yet. But, and there's still plenty of time. There is still plenty of time for everyone to catch up. Forms might change, things might look a little different, but the end result is still the same. The model is still the same. Brokers have value.
Right.
A good broker's value is worth his or her weight in gold. So I think the way we do business is definitely changing. You want to go ahead and start just going over the big changes from this settlement, or am I getting ahead?
We'll
I don't want to
finish.
get ahead.
The big one, obviously, is not being able to put the buyer's compensation in the thing. So we'll finish with that because that's obviously we'll spend most of the time. What are some of the smaller things? Because there's a lot of things in there. It's like, who cares, right?
Yeah. And honestly, when I looked at this last night, just in preparing for today, I mainly focused on the practice changes. How? Because that's what everyone's asking. That's what everyone's nervous about.
Right.
How is this going to affect me and my business? Right now, it's business as usual. You know, the changes don't really go into effect until mid-July is what we're hearing right now. But there are things that we need to be doing if we haven't already done it. A lot of the brokerages that we work with very closely have implemented these changes months ago, some of them years ago. And what are the big changes is that buyer-broker agreement, or here in NAR, we call it the buyer representation agreement. And it's a good thing. I mean, everybody should have been using it all along. Now everybody's going to be required to use it. And I like that. I think it's better to make it a requirement than for some buyers agents to use it and others not to use it. So now everybody has to use it. And I think the hardest part is just going to be explaining it to the consumer who reads headlines that are, and I'm going to say it, fake news, you know? So,
well, clickbait. They want clicks.
That's all
and then,
it is.
Yeah, and
that's all it is. But if you
the world's
really
coming to an end.
If you really just read the settlement, it's not a big deal. And it's change that I think brings forth opportunities, and opportunities for the real estate agents that are the real estate professionals that are not going away.
Right.
You know, the problem that I see in our industry is there is a low barrier to entry, and anyone and their neighbor, you know, can sit in a 70-hour class and become a real estate agent. And it's not going to be like that anymore, you know, because you're going to have to prove your worth. You're going to have to show your worth. And agents have value. Yeah. We in our business, so we're in the legal department at Landmark Title, Sarah and I, and we have seen amazing agents that have saved the day, that go to bat for their customers. And then we have seen some that are not, and those ones will not stick around. Long. They will not.
Amanda, because when I talked to you yesterday, I said we're get you on, and you said you've already been talking about it in your classes and so forth.
Absolutely.
About this, especially about the buyer's agreement. What position are you taking, what NAR is taking, and working and blending this in so everyone's doing it?
Yes. So full disclosure, I don't teach the accredited buyer broker agreement course. Like, I'm not certified to teach that. But in my role through different broker managements and career development locally over the last few years, if you've been working for a good broker, they've been preparing you for this. You know, 6 months ago in my prior role, they had me roll out, maybe even longer than that, 7 or 8 months ago, where I crafted an hour-long training where we talked about, first, what are the different types of agency? Because people really confused the buyer broker representation agreement with just belonging to single agency. And I think that's why so many people were so confused about how is this going to work? Or am I going to have to be a single agent
So for
now?
someone watching this that doesn't understand, we have transactional, right? Or
There's transaction brokers,
transaction brokers,
single
and
agents.
single agent. And if you could quickly define the two.
Sure. So a single agent's going to have fiduciary responsibility to their client. So they have 4 additional responsibilities. Transaction brokers are implied based on Florida statutes. So someone is a transaction broker unless otherwise specified in writing. Whereas if you are a single agent, meaning you have fiduciary responsibility, or you have a no brokerage relationship, or no non-rep, right? Non-rep. Those have to be disclosed in writing prior to that relationship beginning with that customer, okay? But typically in the past, transactional brokers have not had to disclose in writing what their duties are because it's already written into our Florida statutes that it's implied unless otherwise in writing for the other 2. So understanding what your agency is and your broker, because I've had people say, well, how do I know what I am? Your broker is going to tell you. So whoever you work for, they're going to tell you what kind of agency you are. And if you're not sure what that means, ask those questions. You should know what that means.
Right.
So you should know what type of agency you are and what that means. And then the second part of the training, because we kind of divided it into 3 parts, was value. So before, we can all look at this legal document that says buyer broker and learn what the lines say and what it means, but you have to have value. You know, you have to dig deep into that value, and how are you going to prove your value? And here's the biggest misconception where I think, you know, you have the, oh, world is over as we know it, you know, and then you have it's business as usual, and it's like, it's a little both, or really not either, actually. Yes, you need to understand the actual document. You need to read it. You need to go to a training that explains on what it is, but you need to know what your value is. And sometimes it takes a little bit of a mindset shift. You know,
Well, you have to become a salesperson.
you have to be a salesperson.
Yeah.
Whoa, did you know you were in sales? Did you have any idea? And so what you need to do is you have to realize, and I kind of, to try to put it in terms that they could understand, I'm like, guys, this is a listing agreement for a buyer.
There you go.
Okay, when you go into a listing appointment and you're confident and you sit down with that seller and you say, hey, Mr. Seller, here's what I charge, right? And then you start having that first negotiation because commission's negotiable.
You're going to go over what you
You're
do
gonna go over
first.
what you're going to do, and you're
Yeah.
going to start negotiating your commission. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a listing agreement for a buyer, if that makes it easier to understand. And as of December 2023, over 18 other states in the United States have already been using this. Their state laws require that buyer broker agreements be in writing.
So some states are already on top of this as a requirement.
For years. I'm talking 10, 15 years. So this is not brand new for our industry. It's new for our area, for sure, that this is going to be something that's going to be required should the settlement, you know, go as currently proposed.
All right. Well,
So,
that
yes.
brings up something, Sarah, you and I were talking pre-show. We've got a courtroom trying to tell us we have a law. How is this actually they're coming to an agreement and then telling all the agents, oh, that you're required to do this, but who's requiring them to do it?
So
I know I'm throwing you on the spot with that one, but if Rose wants to jump in and help you out on how to word that, but because that's really what's happening. We have a courtroom that's now telling, or 2 parties coming to an agreement that this is the way real estate should be done, but they have no formal setting, no way to create a law out of this.
And right now, it's just a proposed settlement.
Yeah.
Once NAR, once it becomes finalized and approved by the court, then NAR is obligated to comply with the terms of the settlement agreement, or they can be in breach. And so NAR is going to be changing its rules. It's going to be changing its MLS. It's going to, things are going to change.
So
I have a question. Can I ask her a question?
yeah, go ahead.
Because this is a question I get a lot.
Yeah.
I get the question of if the proposed settlement, right, is for NAR to comply, which means any realtor that is a member of NAR must also comply. The question I get is, what if they're not a member of NAR,
Right.
and they're not a realtor, they're a real estate agent? Does it still apply to them if it's not currently part of our Florida statutes?
And I would say no, it does not apply to
Well,
them.
the MLS itself, though, is how is that? That's actually run through the local. I mean, I'm asking a question because I'm not a real estate agent. The MLS is run by our local board, which is obviously sanctioned through Florida Realtors, who are members of NAR, if that actually follows that way. So it just goes back to the MLS and NAR's influence upon it in its way, right?
Right. And a lot of it also goes back to what is custom in the area too. You know, you're going to do what's customary in the area. But if there's no Florida statute and you're not a member, then I would say it does not apply to you, because this is a settlement, proposed settlement with
Members
NAR.
of the association.
Right.
Thank
All right,
you.
I gotta get Sarah to speak here. She's smiling in the middle, looking great. What's another low-lying fruit? Just another thing in this settlement here. If we pick out one of the other,
I want to hit the big ones.
we'll get to.
Sarah, do some little ones so we can get on the big ones.
Well, I think what Amanda was saying about, you know, knowing what you bring to the table as an agent, I know that that's going to be very challenging for a lot of buyers agents because they haven't had to do that in the past. But it's definitely something that you need to read the agreement, know what it's saying, be able to answer any questions that your buyers have. And like
Who's going to be teaching this course over at Landmark Title?
Probably David. But I mean, you know, like Rose said, being a realtor, it's a profession. You know, you're not going to work for free. And I don't think anybody expects anybody, no matter what industry they're in, to work for free. So you have to explain that to your customer, and having that knowledge and experience is definitely, you know, going to help in proving, you know, this, and having that transparency with your customer, saying, this is what I charge, this is what I'll do for you. I'm not just opening doors and writing contracts. Like, I'm going to walk you through what's needed in the contract. I'm going to remind you to send stuff to your lender.
Right.
I'm going to keep track of deadlines.
Extend the loan approval.
Yeah. I mean,
not just the contract closing date.
I think any buyer's agent out there should just take 30 minutes of their time and in their mind write down what they do in a transaction.
I think agents are overthinking it too.
Well, the 100%, 100% there, yeah.
And I'll give you two quick examples. I have an agent that called me yesterday that's all excited because she is getting a new construction house under contract. She's someone I mentor. And her buyers asked her, so that incentive that the builder's giving us, is that going to help pay what we owe you as well? They didn't even know that the builder was going to compensate her, and that incentive was above and beyond the fact that they were already going to take care of her. They didn't know. And then if you think about how many people are moving to Florida from other states, and that there are 18 other states that have been doing this for years and years and years, not all, they never understood how we got paid anyway for the most part. So don't overcomplicate it and don't overthink it.
Right.
Because you're
That's great
also
advice.
making a ton of assumptions instead of just having a conversation.
Yeah,
Bring it back to a conversation.
90% of the consumers out there, buyers, sellers, are not even.
They don't know.
They saw the headline and they're like, whatever, and because they're not thinking about it, they're not buying and selling right now. They're not even thinking about it. Sarah, do you think that the challenge is, the change, but nothing says they can't call the buyer's agent can call the listing agent and say, we want to come over and look at the house. What is your buyer's compensation? You can have that conversation all day long. It just can't happen on the MLS.
Correct.
And are they maybe a little bashful of actually asking that?
I mean,
I would hope the listing agent's looking after the buying agent, because you guys have each other's back, right?
Listen, you run into the same people over and over. They say like 95% or 5% of the agents do 95% of the business. I mean, I've heard that for years. I don't know how true that is, but I've seen it play out. I run into a lot of the same players over and over.
I think 25% of the agents have done 6 or more transactions in the last year.
Don't ask me math questions.
Yeah.
But to that point, and the other thing to remember too is sellers can still offer, okay? They can still not only offer compensation, they just can't put it in MLS. They can still offer concessions in MLS.
right.
That concession just cannot be tied to a buyer's agent's commission. And so think about it when you go to a builder and they're like, hey, we're going to give you $20,000 in concessions. Sometimes they use it towards closing costs. Sometimes they use it to put a fence in. Sometimes they use it to buy their rate down. They can choose sometimes they'll take it off the top of the price of the house. It's the buyer's choice what they do with that concession. So sellers can still offer these concessions Okay, it can still go towards a buyer's closing cost. And if your commission is part of that buyer's closing cost, then technically the seller can still offer that. We just can't call it buyer compensation.
Right.
Those
In
words
MLS.
can't be used in MLS. In MLS.
And I'm sure the forms are going to change as well. You know, the contract forms. Someone mentioned today that we're probably going to need a form between the selling broker and the listing broker, you know, to memorialize the compensation. And the listing agreement, the buyer broker agreement, they're probably all going to be tweaked some once these changes take place.
This is what I see happening. I see someone going out there right now who, because we know there's some in our business, and they're going to say to the seller, hey, I'll list your house. I'm only going to do it I'll do it for 3% when everyone's telling you 5 or 6%. Because I'm not going to pay the buyer's agent. And I'm going to save you 3%. They're not even going to say that to them. It's about the buyers. They're just going to say, I'm going to do it for 3%. And then when the buyer's agent calls them and said, no, I don't, the seller's not paying for your compensation. Because technically they've kind of opened the door or said, oh, I can do that? I can see that happening and causing rifts in the local boards and so forth. And those people's names, I guarantee, will be on social media. Do not deal with this agent listing a house because they're not looking after the buyer's agent.
And not so much
is key.
Not so much looking at the negative aspect of it, but you know, one of the things I wrote down earlier when I was doing my research is in 2022, 86% of all home purchases were done through an agent or a broker. Okay, so what you have to do is educate your seller and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, 86% of purchases are done through an agent or a broker. What does that mean for you? That means that if we don't want to offer any kind of cooperation to a buyer's agent, you could potentially be removing 86% of your possible market share. On top of that, as someone that was highly a listing agent for so many years, there's nothing like a buyer coming with an experienced agent that you know has vetted that person.
Right.
They're pre-approved, not just pre-qualified. Their person is going to be sane. Their buyer's going to be sane throughout the process because that experienced agent is guiding it through it and holding their hand. And, you know, I mean, there's just so much value to like, I hate how everything is just so tied to a percentage right now because the amount of value far exceeds any percentage you could probably put on it. You know, most people that are looking to make a move are because they have to or they have a major life change, and there's just so much value that our industry brings to when people are going through things like that.
And I think the key with those sellers is just explaining it to them. You just have to sit them down and explain it because they see the headlines, they see what's being posted out there, and everyone who has an opinion on the subject trying to give their 2 cents. So I think the key is exactly what you said, just explaining it to them. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, I don't want that, you know. And
Right. There's always going to be that person, like I'm saying, is going to say, oh, I'll do it for 3% because they're not going to pay the buyer's agent. There's going to be those people. Hopefully they get pushed out because when they see that agent is
they'll learn the hard way.
that agent's listing a property, they know, hey, they haven't talked to their seller about compensating the buyer's agent in this. All right, Rose, I know you got a lister. What else is in that?
All right. So I think the 2 main ones were the ones that we touched on about no commissions in the MLS. And then the big one is the one that I really love is the buyer broker agreement. Now at Landmark, we've had a couple brokerages approach us months ago, back like in October when the verdict came out, about tweaking because we had the NAR form here in Northeast Florida, and then we had the FAR form. And so we tweaked the form to add a section so that, okay, look, I'm going to go after, you know, my commission from the seller, you know, the listing broker. But if for whatever reason they're not going to give me my compensation, then buyer, I will come to you, but I will come to you for, and they'll put a percentage, whatever they negotiate, whether it be 2.5% or 3%, whatever it is. And so we've made slight changes to the form. And if anyone's interested, we're happy to help them with that. So that way you could tell the buyer, look, the most that you will ever be out of pocket is blank percentage, whatever you negotiate with your buyer. And then, of course, we're first going to attempt to get that from the listing broker, and then whatever difference there is would be paid by you. So we've made that change, and I'm sure the forms are going to be changed in light of this proposed settlement. But I love that buyer broker agreement. If you just take a few minutes and just look at it, It's very self-explanatory. It clearly explains what your job is, what their job is. There's no confusion. And one broker that I really respect in this industry, he explained it like this. He said, "This is like a relationship. This is a relationship. You can divorce me, but you can't cheat on me." That's how he said it. And I love it. I love it. I'm using it. I'm telling everyone, you can divorce me, but you can't cheat on me. And so that's what it basically memorializes. Look what I'm going to do for you. And it spells it out. So there's no confusion. And it really shows the agent's value of all the work that they're putting in. And then you can give examples of what you did to save the day in so many deals. We have so many stories of, where good agents have saved the day, and saved their buyers from losing their binders or getting the deal closed.
It's kind of interesting because the lack of inventory, and this, here in our pocket of Northeast Florida, we have high demand, which is most of Florida has a high demand, and you're getting multiple offers. You may not getting 20 like you were back in 21 or late 20s.
Thank God. I was exhausted.
Yes. But you're getting multiple offers, and you're getting cash. But cash isn't always king. We've found out that a lot of these cash buyers are very flaky. They'll make an offer to hold for it for 3 or 4 days, and then not come up with the earnest money because now they decided they don't want to buy it. Right. But knowing they're cash, they're at the top of the list, right? So having that savvy real estate agent that is putting their value out there, it's important for the listing agent to be thinking of that buyer's agent and explaining to their sellers that all these deals are squirrely. On the loan side, every deal right now, you talk to any mortgage person, most of the deals we're working with all have extra puzzle pieces to them right now, more so than ever. And I don't know if it's because, obviously the market conditions and everything, but all of this is coming to the top, on the surface there.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of what ifs, especially with on the lending side, with buyers who can barely come down with the down payment and now having to do this. And I think there's going to be some changes. It's all speculation now, but I know one of the lenders that we spoke to said that they're putting language together to put in the contracts that would be acceptable on the lender side, so that it doesn't get counted toward, the percentage that they're allowed to bring and things like that.
And so one of the things I'm planning on doing as well, once this is no longer proposed, or I could do it now. But like I said, 18 other states have been doing this for years, right? You can't tell me that North Carolina doesn't have any VA buyers. So what I'm going to do is look at my network and say, who do I have?
How are you handling VA buyers?
Who do I have in my network that's in North Carolina that I, see at FAR every year or conference or whatever, and say, hey, how do you guys deal with this when you have VA buyers? Because you can't tell me they're not doing VA business. Of course they are. There's always a workaround. Did you mention the VA buyers? All four of us know the rule, but for VA buyers, what does VA not allow them to do?
So they cannot pay commissions or broker fees.
Right. Themselves. So it has to come from the selling side, or that comes from someone else other than the veteran, basically, on that. So that's kind of the winners and losers here, right? I've seen that on quite a few. Who are the winners and losers? Right now, you would say a VA buyer on face value may be a loser here, which I don't see that going very far as our legislative bodies allowing this to go that way. Right. Yeah. And the involvement of the DOJ, I think I wrote it down. The DOJ has got their hands in here somehow, but because everyone keeps bringing it up. But they wanted to eliminate steering. But the MLS is out there for every agent to see versus, to me, if I don't have to actually publish it, and I got Amanda, and I go, I don't like women, so I'm only going to pay you 1%, but a man calls, and I'm going to pay him 3%. You're technically saying I can have that conversation behind closed doors.
As long as it's not on the MLS.
As long as it's not on the... Where,
you bring up a great point.
Yeah.
Because I was like, where are you going with this steering thing? I was like, how is one connected to the other? But I didn't even give thought to that.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're actually taking away some of that transparency that keeps people honest.
Yeah. That's what I don't understand and why they got their hands in it is why are they... What do you mean steering? It's out there for everyone to see what the compensation... Every real estate professional can go in there and see what the comp is going to be on that house. And now you're saying now they can't. So if they're not, now, of course, one of the, Rose, we talked about one of the loopholes was they could put it on their own website, right? United Real Estate Gallery can have their listings on their United Real Estate Gallery website, and they can actually publish it on there, but they can't pull it in the MLS.
Do we know that for a fact?
That's in the.
I'm not sure that.
I mean, this is what people
That
are
was-
talking
This
about.
is what
They're translating
I've heard
through this.
on
Yeah. They're-
one of the recent.
Well, it just all goes back to the thing. I don't know how
Right.
courtrooms making laws, right? We're
Right.
calling them laws, but they're not. They're kind of like, what would you call them? Rules? Rules of engagement? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really what they're kind of talking
But then
about.
think about the tech that's going to involve for a broker too, because they're already paying to syndicate, right?
Right, to
From
send
the
that
from the
same listing.
MLS, which is not going to have the information. So then they would have to bring in like some kind of tech too to be able to, and then keeping up with updating it because it's not updated
Well, and
automatically.
some people were also talking about, there's those third-party vendors that they use to schedule the showings and things like that, and then they could put in the notes section, they could disclose.
There
it
was
there.
something
The
about
showing timeout.
third-party vendors. There is something in there, as one of the gentlemen, he was doing a schematic, one of the videos I was watching about third-party vendors, but it goes back to this, what the DOJ's are. They're saying don't steer people, but now you're saying we're giving you a loophole to steer people.
So I think
'Cause-
the intent with that whole thing was one of the major claims in the lawsuit was that agents were filtering the commission amounts. So they would go towards which I don't know if it was an option here in
which
Northeast
is
Florida.
crazy because if it was an option, I've never heard of it and I
Fil-
would have even
explain
thought
to me what
about
you mean by
it.
filter.
So
filter
they
the-
would filter the commission amounts by seeing, what was being listed for
Like high to low
3%
filter.
co-broke. So the buyer's agents would only show their clients the houses that had the higher commission amounts, even though their client's dream house could have only been offering 1%. They wouldn't show those houses to their
Those were the
customer.
allegations.
So that's
I
what
would
was
really,
alleged.
I would really like to see the real estate market that only offering the buyer's agent 1%. That's my. But I did hear that as well,
I've seen it.
where they only offer 1%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've
Wow.
definitely seen it in our local marketplace for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's not rampant, but I've seen it.
But to go back to what she's saying, when I mentioned, I did, because I heard that, and I don't know if I was talking to my wife or whatever, and she said, I didn't know. I think Patty Ketchum even said, when I talked to her the last time we were talking about the NAR lawsuit, she goes, I didn't even know we could do that.
And
Can
me
you do
neither.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because most of
no
you
idea.
are focusing on price point more than.
Well, and let's be honest, our clients drive, okay? They have access to almost the same information that we do. Everything, all these platforms are syndicated now. They need our expertise and our knowledge and our experience. But as far as just sorting by price and area, they do that
Zillow.
themselves. So to me too, I feel like it would be so hard to hide their dream home and not have it, not show it. Because they're going to, if it's their dream home, they're going to find it if it matches their parameters. And they're going to say, I want you to show me this.
Unless you have like the out-of-state people who just hire a buyer's agent to do the work for them, and then they don't.
Well, you're always
don't
going to have that
bother looking.
scrupulous person who might say, oh, but that house, I heard that's got a contract on it, so you can't see that. I could see scrupulous people doing that. You're going to have that in every industry.
Sure.
But go back to the market running things basically on what we're selling the house for. But if you're in a market, as you know, our market, and you're not offering 2.5-3% to the buyer's agent, you're not being competitive with what all the other sellers are offering, right? So it just comes, it just drives that from the market conditions. Rose, what else do we have on there?
Those were the two big things. That's why, there's all this hype in the media about how the real estate industry is changing, and everyone, a lot of headlines that just are completely not true and are like what you said, just trying to bait them in. But so really, yeah, there's change, but it's really not. It's not that drastic. Like I said in the beginning, the destination is the same. I don't think much is going to change except the way that we do business, and that agents need to know their worth. They need to prove their worth. They need to show it. Going to start having to use those buyer broker agreements, and at Landmark, we're happy to make changes for your particular brokerage if you want to tweak some of the forms, and then also just not disclosing the commission in the MLS, which there are other ways. People are just gonna, when they schedule their appointment, hey, what's your broker? What's the co-op here?
I want to call out Faith Walker. I don't know Faith, but she says this is very informative. So
Aw.
I appreciate
We
that,
love
Faith,
Faith.
on Facebook there.
And then there still are a lot of what ifs that we're just, I think, waiting and seeing. We don't really want to speculate on. There are what ifs, like we said, with the VA and.
Amanda, what do the scuttlebutt, and from the brokerage level, because you work closely with a lot of with the leadership and realize, hitting the crosstalk, the water cooler talk, I call it, and people falling out. My personal opinion is that, I'm actually, I was telling a story this morning to my boss. I saw someone that I've known for years. We've worked together at different times. Was doing very well with the company he was working for. He just says, after 20 years in the mortgage business, I'm out, guys. I'm looking for something else. I want to go here in this direction and use my sales abilities, and he wants to get out of the business. This is going to give an excuse to some people to leave, and that negativity that they're going to have because they just didn't just do it before. They now have a ticket. They could say, I'm leaving because of this. How is that going to, you think, change how you're doing your trainings, changing how these brokerages are retaining people? Because obviously the whole mission of this was to come across with a positive message that, hey, just stay cool.
Yeah.
Things will settle out. The one thing about capitalism is the market will balance it. We might have some stupidity for a few minutes, but we're going to get back on it here. But what are some positions that they're taking?
So I think you need to look at your brokerage currently. And if you are overwhelmed, confused about this whole situation, maybe you need to take a look at where you're at, because the leaders in this marketplace have been preparing their agents, value trainings, the actual document training. And again, we don't want to jump to the sky is falling. It's not even finalized yet. But if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, right? And so, and I think I shared a story with you the other day, like post-licensing season is what I call it. The month before license is renewed is usually when I do all my post-licensing classes.
Right. Ethics filled.
Realtors, we love to wait to the very last minute to keep our licenses going, our livelihood. And so usually that last month before renewal, twice a year, is when I do all post-licensing. My post-licensing classes have been light. So here's what I can tell you about that. In the last 2 years, if they were licensed in the last 2 years, they started at a time where it was very easy to enter this business.
Mm-hmm.
And then it almost kind of came to a halt a few months later. And I think a lot of them are not renewing. Okay. Wow. And so that's been, because even I can even gauge with my online offerings, because, some people just want to take it online. Well, I offer that as well. So I can track what's coming in post and pre. And I have way more people getting licenses for the first time in Florida, a sales license. And I've had a lot this month alone from other states that have broker's licenses that are coming to get their broker's license here. Oh. So interesting enough, I'm having more get your license classes than keep your license classes. Wow. And so do I think there's going to be fallout? Yes. And I think we're already starting to see it. I think this renewal period is going to be very telling because it's been so light in attendance and registrations for post-licensing. But again, I think it's telling of the fact that they've been licensed only in the last 2 years. So they probably killed it in the first few months, and then things changed and they never learned how you really have to do it in this business. It's not always easy. It's normally not easy. And I think, all this is just very overwhelming. But I think also it depends on their leadership, So when things were really good too, we saw a lot of these smaller brokerages pop up, right? That, they're smaller, independent, and that's great. I love the fact that we have so much different, all the diversity and all the different options depending on how you want to run your business and who you want to hang your hat at. But I think some of them are struggling with education because some of their agents are the ones that are really overwhelmed. At least that's been my experience. Yeah. So,
well, it's common sense. It actually is in the 100 some agents that I've spoken to in the podcast. Obviously, we talk, hey, why did you go to brokerage? Oh, education and technology. Well, that's what everyone says.
Yes.
So tell me about the education that's actually better than somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah. And so, I do offer small brokerage services, and that came from a good friend of mine that started his own brokerage. Yeah. And he gave me the idea. He's like, listen, I would love to have an opportunity to have someone to come in on a contract basis or buy a package, or like once a month we pick a topic that's relevant where I don't have to have someone on staff, or I don't have to do it. And I'm like, absolutely, I could do that. I'll come to you. You can come to one of my training rooms.
And you can find a good lender to probably pay for it.
Yeah. And so, that is something like, know that you have options. I'm sure I'm not the only person out there in Northeast Florida that does that.
Right.
So, if you are a smaller brokerage and your people are hungry for education because they just want to understand it, then know that there's resources out there for you to bring people in and have it sponsored by a lender.
And that's one thing we at Landmark, one thing that we love about our new building is we do have a training room that is state of the art. It seats over 80 people. And we do a lot of CE classes with Landmark University. And one of the classes that we are currently submitting for CE approval is on this whole NAR settlement and legislative updates and just changes in real estate. And so everyone's welcome to use our training room as well.
Well, Sarah and Rose, how important, I'll let you finish on this question, whether it's NAR, Florida Realtor, or NAR, National Association, right now, more than ever, because I know you guys probably belong to several professional industry organizations from a legal side. How important is it right now for the agents really obviously get engaged if they're not and support those who are spearheading? Because this is going to go to a legislative thing. This is going to go to whether it goes to Tallahassee or goes to DC, and you need RPAC, you need Florida Realtor, you need those people, and they're just real estate agents just like you that are taking on the role of also representing you, but to support them now.
I say it's more important than ever because they have your interests at the, they're the ones that spearhead protecting your interests and the education. So that way you're not getting it from the headlines and you're getting it directly from them. And they keep you up to date. You get the breaking news reports directly from them, and they're much more trustworthy than what you see in the news.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, it's a fine line between staying informed and drowning out the media hysteria.
Right.
So, having organizations like that are actually going to give it to you straight, that's super important to be able to educate yourself on what's happening in the industry and not just listen to, the newscasters who have never been in the industry just give their take on what's going on.
And I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited about these changes. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. I don't think this is bad at all. I mean, it really is business as usual, but the path is different.
And
you can still
transactions
it's
have
just
been doing this for years.
Exactly. So. It's really not that different. Yes, you're not going to put it on MLS. You're going to put it somewhere else.
We'll find another way.
There is another way.
There is another way.
That is one of the things we do best in this industry is when we come into a roadblock, whether it's title or lending,
high interest rates,
or inspection, we find another way. I mean, we were born to do that.
Right,
so we have a monthly closers meeting, and today's topic was the Getting to Yes initiative, and it's all about getting to yes. There is a way.
There's a way.
When there's a will, there's a way.
We'll find a way. Just to go back, I want to point that you have to, those who are not RPAC, just talking to listeners out there, if you're not donating to RPAC, this is the time. Now, at Lee Brown, Crazy Shit in Real Estate podcast, it's great, but Lee Brown is an industry influencer. She did a great YouTube video, so look her up, Lee Brown, it's Leigh Brown. She did a great, about 28 minutes today. She on YouTube, I remember, if it wasn't today, it was yesterday, she recorded it. But listen to what she said. But the important thing is you need to be calling your representatives now at RPAC, at NAR, Florida Realtor, NAR, and at the federal government and in Tallahassee right now, letting them know how you feel and where you stand. Or if NAR is eventually going to come out with their official statement, I know they're meeting and that sort of, what is that, and get behind it. Or be part of the influence of what that statement's going to say, and then go to Tallahassee with it, because that's the only way that you got to protect your industry. Oh. And Kim Knapp said something to me a couple weeks ago that really resonated, and I think a lot of people assume when you go to other countries. As I had an agent from Miami who deals in other countries, there might be 6 real estate signs in front of a house from 6 different brokerages. we have ethical things that we have here, and it's Florida Realtor and our local board that keep those ethics and how our business is conducted. So it is professional. And being out there and so I wanted you to, if you want to tap on it, just donating to RPAC, being involved, or supporting those who are representing you.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. You guys have to speak up. You're paying these dues. If you're not involved, you need to get involved, because you can't sit behind your keyboard and read the headlines only and start panicking or start a conversation in another group over your panic because you want validation.
Get on a Facebook chat.
Right? Because that's what's happening. You're reading one headline and then you're going to start a conversation so you can feel validated. Go out there. These people, you pay for this. You pay for this kind of support. They need to know how you feel, because if you don't tell them, they're going to assume what they do know is how everybody feels. So you need to communicate with with NAR, with FAR, with our local representatives. And I promise you, anyone that is part of the RPAC committees, or however they're situated, like their board members, or I'm sure there's like certain leaders for our general area, they probably have direct lines to those state representatives and those legislatures on the on the national level, because that's their job to do that, is to know those people and advocate for what we need and what we want as an industry. And so you need to communicate those things and let them work for you. Yeah,
and you agents on the front line, you have the solutions because you're in it.
Right.
You know what works, what doesn't work, and so they want to hear from you.
I had one thing, actually, we didn't get to any of the questions that I really wrote here, but I only wrote a few. But where, just to circle back to the beginning, where does caveat emptor come into this whole thing?
I love it. Buyer beware. Yes. Buyer beware. And so it is buyer beware. Do your due diligence, do your homework, and get the right agent. Get the right agent. Don't just hire the first one that you see. Do your homework, and then you'll know which one you feel comfortable with. Just like hiring an attorney, it's the same thing. You don't just hire the first attorney that someone recommends to you. You want to be comfortable with them. It doesn't mean that they're not a good attorney. You might just not mesh well with them. And you want someone that understands you, that will work for you, that will help you through the transaction. Sometimes it's just a matter of personalities, but you want someone who you are comfortable with.
Sarah, because I'll go back to our first question, was you giving us the background on where this all started. Where did this how did this even get going without saying, these people sign contracts that aren't like, 50-page contracts. They're 10, 12 pages sometimes, and half of it's written by a lawyer, and everybody that ever bought a house is signed for. How does the caveat emptor, it didn't even, I really don't understand from the simple. It was like, how do you bring up such a lawsuit? Why does that not apply here?
I mean, I don't really know how it started. I don't know if a bunch of sellers just started talking about commissions and then they reached out to an attorney, and the attorney saw dollar signs and said, yeah, sure, we can, file something that's, in violation of the antitrust laws. But, I think the biggest thing for the buyers the buyer's agents is reputation is key. It always has been, but I think now it's even more so, because if all buyers are now required to sign that buyer brokerage agreement, they're going to start looking at reviews of buyer's agents, because if they're going to be paying for it, they want to make sure that they're paying for a good agent.
Right.
So I think that is a big thing. And I mean, also reputation's key on the listing side. If your buyer's agent knows that you're a listing agent that's not going to be flexible, and, try to talk to their seller about offering a co-broke commission, I mean, you're going to lose out on buyers.
Right. Amanda, I was concentrating on what Sarah was saying there, so gather my thought on this.
So I am so excited, because we have been in such a world of popularity contest. I can't tell you how many times I'm in some mom's group or military wives group or something, and they're like, hey, who do you recommend as a realtor? And they're like, 100%, she's the best one in the area. And I look her up, she's had one sale, she's been licensed 4 months, right? and that's okay. I don't mean she doesn't need business. Of course she does. Go get it, girl. And your friends love you, and that's awesome. But for the agents that are going out there and getting the education, that know their value. And if you're not, now's the time to do it and prepare yourself, because you are going to have to interview now. When people assign $1 to your work, they are going to expect more than you have a really cute headshot.
Okay, that just brings
And
up.
you have a lot of friends that think you're really fun.
So so two things, and actually my wife brought this up last night. Two things, but could this push people back to the brand, to the
Interesting.
big Keller Williams, the Coldwell Bankers, because of the brand, knowing that, oh, I know that real estate, they've been there a long time, or the brokers there is awesome. So whoever works for them must be awesome.
Well, and I think
Could it push them that way?
And to your point earlier, you were like, if it's and just like Sarah just said, if the listing agent is going to be known to have a reputation to not explain the value of offering a co-broke to their seller, we'll call it that, then if that agent works for a specific brokerage, is that brokerage then going to carry that reputation? It could go the opposite way too, because yes, people associate value with brands that are long lasting, that have been around, that they trust. So I think that is definitely a point.
Well, so my wife brought up something I think is brilliant. Appraisers have to spend godless hours as an apprentice. Real estate agents, you pass that test and you're signed with a brokerage, you're licensed to kill.
Listen, bless their hearts. They come in 2 years later for post-licensing, and they don't know what kind of agency they are. And I mean, there absolutely should be an apprenticeship.
Yeah, that they have to, whether, and then obviously, senior agents who want to take on that responsibility of being, to lead that up, or whether it's individual brokerages. Some brokerages are already set up for that.
A lot of brokerages are set up where they'll actually have a compensation model to compensate and incentivize their senior agents to get
mentor
these new people off the ground and running and making money and doing things the proper way.
But I think in the end of the day, it's back to basics and back to the buyer's agent having their presentation, just like you do on the listing side. You're going to have a presentation, and in the end of the day, it's going to come back to you doing a good job and word of mouth, and that's how you get your business. It's not going to be how it was. It's not. You're really going to have to, because you're going to get pushback from sellers.
Well,
and so you're going to have
like we said, 90% of them are not even going to be paying attention. Right. It's going to be, but you should be able to handle that question, though.
Yes.
Right.
It's going to come up because of the headlines.
Yeah, and why it's important that they offer the compensation, because the whole point of the buyer's agreement, if I'm not mistaken, and these different people, pundits all talking, is that the buyer is saying to their buyer's agent, if they're not offering you comp, go to another house. You have the ability to say, if they're not offering comp for you as the agent, we agree with you. Just move on to a house that is.
And so that was something that Patty had mentioned, I believe, in her podcast with you. Yep. And again, this was back in October. This was before we even had any kind of proposal or anything.
That was after the initial agreement with
so
Caldwell.
So listen, before there was even a proposed settlement, we were already working on workarounds. Yeah. We were figuring out how to get to the end of the road. And so one of the things she had said, to reiterate, was that if you're using a buyer-broker agreement, there's an additional terms and conditions where if your buyer instructs you in writing to not show you homes that are not offering at least a certain percentage co-op, so that they are fully aware of how much they maximally could be responsible for, or maybe none, maybe they want it all covered, or maybe they need it all covered because they're a VA buyer.
Or a lot of first-time home buyers don't.
It's still not going to stop the buyer's agent from picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, Sarah, got this awesome VA buyer that really wants to see your seller's house. Unfortunately, I'm instructed in writing that I can't show it unless there's a co-op." Think you could have a conversation with your seller? You're not going to not at least have the conversation, because you also still don't get paid until it closes.
Right. 100%.
So we're going to see a lot of that stuff pop up. And I think that's what agents are. They're looking for answers. They all want like an answer and a plan. And the thing is, it's still very speculation. You need to rely on your foundations. You need to know your value. You need to get an education. You need to read the document, because it's a listing agreement for a buyer, y'all. Read the document. If you're like, I've never done a buyer presentation, that document basically walks you through it. So if you weren't sure what to do, it covers all the high points. It'll walk you through it step by step. And I think brokers, you need to start having classes on how to do a proper buyer presentation and show your value. Now's the time.
You really, because I hear some of the horror stories. And to sell the podcast, I've had 170 some top agents on there, and they tell you what they're doing and why they continue to get referrals after referrals and so forth. And if you're not doing it, you're not having those conversations with the other agent. You're not building the relationships with the other agents. And so you're watching each other's back, and you're confident that I know Amanda, if she's got that listing, she's got the buyer's broker covered in there. I don't even have to ask her because she's a top agent, that type of thing. Is there anything else we want to add here? Sarah, anything else that was on there we think someone should know on the highlights?
I think we pretty much covered the top points. I think it's not as bad as we thought it would be. It really is not bad at all. Still the same. Things are going to be a little different in terms of how we get there, but I don't think it's going to be, don't believe the headlines. Read the actual settlement. You're gonna not that different.
You have to. Agents work a lot already. And agents who are newer, maybe not seeing it as busy. But when you get busy, you got multiple listings. You got offers coming in. You're up till 9, 10 o'clock at night. You're talking to people are calling you. You're educating the seller on, hey, this is the offer we got. Do we want to hold off? All these things going on, and you have to take some time for the education piece.
You do.
And you just got to add another tool to your tool belt here, and how we're going to approach these buyers and sellers. Accordingly, to get paid your value.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Ladies, I appreciate you coming on.
We're excited about what the future holds. And if anyone has any questions, we're just a phone call away.
Yeah. Well, when this is approved, I think it's going to be tweaked personally. I think something's going to be tweaked, and this is going to take a couple months. We'll come on, and whether we do a shorter show, but educate everyone on or we just do it virtually from across the street.